你好, welcome to Ask Andy. In this video, our topic is Chinese numbers 03. I'm going to answer 2 questions. Question number 1. 110 refers to 101 or 110. You may not see it in your Chinese textbook, but you're going to hear it in China or in HSK listening. I'm going to answer this important question. And I'm going to teach you numbers from 101 to 1000 in this video. Question number 2. Culture tips. 250 refers to idiot in China. You may have heard it from your Chinese friends or your Chinese teacher, but maybe you have just heard about it for the first half of the story. I'm going to let you know the second half of the story, which is when and why. It's an interesting question to answer. Let's get started. Okay, question number 1. 110 refers to 101 or 110. So let's start from 101. So for 101 in Chinese, so we read it as 101. So that is 101. 101. Then what about 102? So that is 102, which is 102. 102. And then what about 103? 103 is 103. So that is 103. 103. So it's easy, right? We just read the 0 and the whole thing, make that into 100 something. Let's move on. So it's easy. So 104, it will be 104. 104. 105, 105. 105. 106, 106. 106. 107, 107. 107. 108, 108. 108. 109, 109. 109. So if you find it a bit tricky for you to do the numbers from 1 to 10, you can refer to this video. I shared my tricks for the pronunciations in that video. You can check it out. Let's move on. So right now, it's the moment for me to answer this question. 110 refers to 101 or 110. So 101, we read it as 101, which is 101. 101. But what about 110? So for 110, we read it as 110. Remember, we read it as 110, not just 110. So we read it as 110. So that is 110. 110. And for the colloquial one, we may truncate it into 110. 110. So 110 refers to 110, not 101. But remember, that is just for the colloquial one. And the formal one, or in the textbook, you're going to see this one. 110. 110. And I recommend you to read it with the complete one because it's easier and better for you to remember it and for Chinese people to understand when you're speaking to them. The thing is, when you have it by itself, like 110, you can read it as 110. When you have another syllable, it can be another number or there's another something after it. You must keep that 10. Let's see this example. So 111. So you have another 1 after it. So we need to read it as 111. So that is 111. 111. Remember, in this case, this 10, you can't omit it. You must read it as 111. 111. And then let's move on. So this is a rule for you to remember. 10 is read as 110 when the number goes over 100. And then let's check it. So if you have 115, what would that be? How can you read it? So remember this rule. So 10 is read as 110 when it goes over 100. So 115, in your mind, you need to think. So that would be 100, 110, 5. 100, 110, 5. So that is 115. 115. And then what about 119? The same. Think about it. 10 is read as 110 when the number goes over 100. So it would be 100, 110, 9. That is 119. 119. And then let's move on. So 120. 120, we read it as 102 tenths. So also here, so the correct one or the formal one in the textbook, we are going to read it as 120. 120. But for the colloquial one, I don't recommend you to say it, but you may hear it in China or in HSK listening. It will be 120. 120. So you can think, actually, that's a lazy version, right? People just omit the 10. In the end, they just do 120. But for you, you need to read the complete one. And then 123. So we read it as 102 tenths 3. Remember, when you have another syllable, so the 3 after it, so you can't omit that 10. You need to keep it. So we read it as 123. 123. Try it. So how can we read 129? So you need to think in your mind. So that will be 102 tenths 9. 129. 129. That's it. It's not that complicated, right? Actually, it's easy. Let's move on. So 130, the same. Think about it. So 130, we're going to read it as 103 tenths. When it is by itself, we can omit the 10. But the formal one would be 130. 130. So for the colloquial one, the lazy one, we can omit the 10. So that will be 130. 130. And I recommend you to read 130. 130. And then what about 134? The same. So 103 tenths 4. In that case, you must keep the 10 there. So that will be 134. 134. What about 138? Think about it in your mind. So that will be 103 tenths 8. That is 138. 138. That's it. And then now it becomes easy. So we just follow the pattern to move on. So 140, we can read it as 104 tenths. So that will be 140. 140. And that 10 in the end, for the colloquial one, for spoken Chinese, you can omit it. But I don't recommend you to do that. That is for you to do the listening in HSK or for you to understand when native Chinese talk to you about that number. So when we are practicing here, I recommend you to keep that 10 in the end. So 140, that will be 140. 140. 150. 150. 150. 160. 160. 160. 170. 170. 170. 180. 180. 180. 190. 190. 190. Good. I think you get it, right? Let's move on for this one. So remember, when we have another syllable, it can be a number, it can be something else, after that 10, we need to keep that 10 there. So 145, it will be 145, 145, 156, 156, 156, 167, 167, 167, 178, 178, 178, 189, 189, 189, 199, 199. Okay, it's not that complicated. It's easy, right? Actually, Chinese number system may be the easiest one or the simplest one in the world. It's so logical for you to move on. Okay, let's move on to 200. Here is something. So for 200, there are two ways to read it. So we can read it as 200 or 200. And it's easy for you to understand. So in my previous video, I explained the difference between 两 and 2. So here, for this 两, you can think that is 200. And then 200, you can think that is the second 100. It also makes sense, right? When we are counting the first 100 and the second 100, it also makes sense. Here is the thing. So what about 201? So remember, 101, we need to read that 0. So it is 201, 201, or 201, 201. And then what about 210? The same. So we can read it as 210, 210, or 210, 210. Remember, when 10 goes over 100, we need to read it as 110. And if it goes without another number or another syllable after it, we can omit the 10. So you may hear people say it as 201, 201, or 201, 201. Let's move on. So what about 220? So it can be 220, 220, or 220, 220. Which one do I recommend? I recommend you to read the first one, 220. Why? That is easier for us to pronounce, I think. Personally, I prefer that one. And then for this one, 250, 250. So for 250, we can read it as 250, 250, or 250, 250. When does it mean idiot in China? I'm going to let you know in the cultural tips later. Okay, let's move on. So what about this number? 299. So we have another syllable after the 10. So remember, in this case, we can't omit that 10. We need to read it, think about it in your mind. So that will be 209 times 9. So it will be 299, 299, or 299, 299. And then let's move on. So it's sort of a quiz. Let's try it. So 345. So you need to think about it in your mind. So it will be 304 times 5. That is 345, 345, 678. So that will be 607 times 8. 678, 678. 999. That will be 909 times 9. 999, 999. It's not that difficult, right? Actually, it's easy for you to move on when you have known about the rules and my tricks. It's easy. Okay, an exciting moment. So right now we are going to learn 1,000. So 1,000 in Chinese is 1,000. 1,000. So here it's the same as 100, although we write it as 1. So 1, here you can see the tone is the first tone. But when we read it as the fourth tone. 1,000. 1,000. So it's related to tone change rules in pinyin in Chinese pronunciation. So you can refer to the audio here to check it out, to understand about the tone change rules. Okay, we have done question number 1. 1,000 refers to 101 or 110. Right now is the moment for us to move on to culture tips. 250 refers to idiot in China. When and why? So it's an interesting question for me to answer. Let's see it. So 250 refers to idiot in China. When and why? So we have known that 250, we have 2 ways to read it. Actually 4, right? So we read it as 250. 250. Or we omit that 10. It becomes 250. 250. The other way, 250. 250. Or we omit the 10. It becomes 250. 250. So which one refers to idiot in China? Which one? Here it is. 250. So when we read it as 250, remember, you can't read it as 250 or 250 or 250. It's just this one. 250 refers to idiot in China. Here is an example. So when you say 他是个250, 他是个250 means he is an idiot. So remember, this is really offensive and it's so mean to talk to someone or you comment on someone, he's an idiot. He's a 250 in this way. So please remember, don't say that, or better not say that in China. So the thing is, why? Actually, there's a story about it. So the story is as follows. Long time ago in ancient China, there was an emperor. His name was Q. And he had a really good friend and advisor whose name was S. We can take it as S. So S. But one day, S was murdered. So Q was shocked and sad. So he tried his best to find out who was the murderer. But he failed to find it out. So one day he came up with a good idea. So the idea was like that. So he announced that S was actually the traitor to the empire. So he was thinking about to offer a reward to the murderer. So he said the murderer actually was the hero because he killed the traitor. And if someone confessed who was the murderer, who was the hero, he's going to be rewarded with 1,000 grams of gold. So 1,000 grams of gold. A lot, right? And then the funny thing was there were 4 people claimed they were the murderer. Actually, not the murderer, the hero who killed S. So Q asked them, okay, I think you 4 are all the heroes. So right now, there's a question for you. So what's your plan to share that 1,000 grams of gold? The 4 heroes, the 4 idiots, they said to the emperor, it's easy, my emperor. Each of us just get 1/4 of that 1,000 grams of gold, which is 250. In that case, we can share the gold. Hearing that, the emperor just said, drag these 4 250 out and kill them. So that's the story about 250. That's why 250, remember, we need to read it as 250 in this way. 250. 250. So after that, 250 refer to idiot in China. So that's a story. I'm not sure it's true or false, but it's easier for you to understand or to remember 250 in this way refers to idiot in China. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. 再见